Mary took a deep breath, determined to ignore the barbs being flung at her like shrapnel. She'd chosen this place not to humiliate herself, but because it was important to Elias. He'd wanted to show his drawing to his father, the man who existed only in the margins of their lives, a mere signature on Banchak's marked alimony. His father, Charles, was a giant in the world of high finance, towering over the city's most important companies. Towers, so high up that its penthouse apartments seemed to pierce the clouds. But for Elias, his daddy was only the man in the expansive suits who occasionally smiled at him, ruffled his hair, and he gave him small presents always in public, never taking him to parks or teaching him to ride a bike. Elias knew his father worked all the time, but sometimes he dreamed that his dad would take him to a real adventure, to a place where they could be just the two of them and no one would ever say you don't belong here. For 6 years, Mary had fought to protect her son from the world's rudeness, shielding him with her own body, her tenderness, and the endless patience. She was his anchor, his only certainty. And when Elias showed her the drawing he'd made for Father's Day, she realized that to maintain this illusion of happiness, she needed to take him to see his father, to the place where his dad felt at home. So she made reservations at the most exclusive restaurant in town, a place where the menu boasted delicacies from around the world, and the wine list featured vintages so rare they sounded like fairy tales. But instead of magic, she found a harsh reality check. The head waiter glided toward them, his smile frozen like a mask. "Miss Jenkins, I presume," he sighed, confirming the reservation. His tone was like ice shards scraping against glass. Then came the 3 words that shattered everything. "You don't belong here." The sentence wasn't spoken with care, but with a cold, razor-edged judgment, an invisible knife slashing at the dignity of a woman far too used to being looked down on. The waiter's words chewed through her as if she were standing in the eye of a hurricane, surrounded by a roaring silence. His tone held a disdain that made it clear they were unwelcome, unwanted. For a moment, Mary felt as though she couldn't breathe. Her carefully constructed world crumbled, threatening to pull her into its jagged cracks. She was about to speak, to defend herself and her son, when she saw the drawing clutched tightly in Elias' hand. The innocent picture of a family holding hands under a bright, hopeful sky. Her son's dreams were too pure to be sullied by the bitterness that threatened to spill from her lips. And Mary knew that in this moment, she had a choice to make. Would she let the darkness within her consume her, or hold on to the light of her son's innocence? Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders, her eyes flashing with a newfound determination. "No more," she thought, her voice echoing in her chest. "You're wrong. We do belong here, because our family is more than just money or status. It's about love, hope, and the dreams. Dreams that even the fanciest restaurant can't buy." A faint smile touched Elias' lips as he proudly presented his drawing to the head waiter. "It's for my dad," he sighed, his voice ringing with innocence. And in that instant, something shifted in the room. The head waiter's icy facade cracked, revealing a flicker of humanity. Perhaps it was the child's simple honesty, or the unwavering bond between mother and the son that broke through the restaurant's cold indifference. Whatever the reason, a change came over the room. The other diners, who had been watching intently, began to murmur amongst themselves. Some shook their heads in disapproval, others exchanged uneasy glances. But there were a few, very few, who offered a subtle nod of support. The bell above the cafe door chimed merrily, announcing the arrival of a new customer. But today, Mary hadn't come to swallow one more insult. She had come to hand her son a right he had since birth, the right to meet his father, Ezra Brooks, a man who had once promised to build a future with her, then turned away under the pressure of the invisible standards imposed by his mother. Mary didn't expect that the first strike in this confrontation wouldn't come from Ezra, but from another woman, Ivy Hale, in an expansive white suit, closing in with confident steps and an icy gaze. Ivy didn't just approach Mary's table, she walked straight into a child's simple dream and crushed it with a caustic line. "This drawing is ridiculous, little boy. Like your mother trying to force her way into Ezra's world." The sound of the paper being ripped from Elias's hands seemed louder than all the clatter of cutlery in the cafe. And when Ivy's heel came down on the picture, the room grew so silent you could hear the boy's strangled breath. One moment, one act, but it lit the fuse of a violent storm, a storm that would tear down walls of pretense. Andy picture perfect facades built to hide the truth. Andy from the wreckage, the world would, for the first time, witness the power of a voice believed to be the smallest of all, a child's. Andy, this was only the beginning. Mary looked at Elias. His face drained of color, his eyes wide with shock. Her protective instincts kicked in, pushing back the hurt and the anger she felt at Isra's mother for a moment. "Leave him alone," she sighed, standing up, her voice surprisingly steady. Ivy raised her head, a cool smile twisting her lips. "Oh, so the little tramp has a champion. How touching. But don't bother, darling. Your mother isn't exactly welcome here. And neither are you." She gestured to Elias, who shrank back behind his mother's legs, clutching her skirt like a life raft. "You won't stand by and watch you hurt my son?" Mary sighed, her grip tightening on Ivy's arm. The words tumbled out in a rush. "You have no more right to treat him like this. He deserves better than the way you and Ezra have treated him." A cold laugh escaped Ivy's lips. "You misunderstand, dearie. This is my family. You can do whatever you want. And what you want is for you to leave now." She shook off Mary's grip and turned to go, pausing at the door. "Andy, tell that little boy his fantasies about his father are over. It's time he learned the truth. His father doesn't want him." The slam of the door echoed the finality of Ivy's words. Andy, for a moment, Mary stood frozen, the full weight of Ivy's words crashing over her. But she wasn't about to give up. Not when it came to her son. Not when it was his happiness that was at stake. She picked up the torn drawing, smoothing out the wrinkles, a small smile touching her lips. "Well, we may not have a picture if me and Daddy together, but we have this one," she told Elias, her voice thick with emotion. He looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "But Mom, you wanted to draw Daddy and me together. We'll do that next time, sweetheart," she sighed, hugging him close. "But today, we're going to see your father, no matter what." As they stepped out into the bright sunlight, Mary felt a surge of determination. The road ahead might be fraught with challenges, but she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Elias, for a chance at a life that had been unjustly denied to them. She hailed a cab, ignoring the surprised glance from the driver when he saw the boy holding a picture of a stick-figure family. As they pulled up outside a towering apartment block, Mary took a deep breath, smoothing down her dress. She adjusted Elias' collar, forcing herself to meet his worried gaze. "Do you remember what he told you, sweetheart? You're the best boy a mother could ask for. And no matter what happens, you and he will always have each other." He nodded, his lower lip trembling. She leaned down, kissing his forehead. "I love you, Elias. I love you too, Mom." When the cab had disappeared around the corner, Mary straightened her shoulders and walked toward the building, her small hand covering the trembling one of her son. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. It was time to rewrite their story. She paid her dues, raised her son, built a life. Now, 6 years on, she sipped her coffee, bracing for the usual reception at Meridian Cafe. The owner knew her story, how she'd sit outside in the winter with her son, how they'd wait until spring to eat on the patio again. He knew because he'd been a part of the community board that had voted her down. This time, though, something was different. A woman sat at the table next to Mary, sipping tea, her eyes bright behind thick glasses. As the cafe filled up, Mary watched her. She was probably in her 30s, maybe younger. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, a silver pendant resting against her chest like a half moon. She was talking, laughing, leaning forward as if sharing a joke that was so good it hurt. And then she saw Mary looking and she waved. Startled, Mary looked away. When she dared to glance back, the woman was gone. Later, when her order arrived, Mary found herself smiling. The food tasted better than usual. Maybe it was the sun, finally making an appearance after weeks of gray skies, or perhaps it was the memory of that woman's laughter, light and clear as a wind chime. An hour later, the bell above the door chimed. Mary's head jerked up, her breath catching. The woman from the cafe entered, her eyes searching. When she spotted Mary, her face broke into a wide grin. "Hey, sir," she called out, walking over. "I didn't get your name before." "I'm sorry, Mary," she replied, wondering what the woman wanted. "I've been wanting to talk to you," she sighed, settling into the chair opposite Mary. About what? Mary asked, worried. About this, she sighed, tapping a folder in her hands. I'm from City Harvest. We work with a lot of nonprofits. One of our clients is Meridian Cafe. They mentioned to us that you are that you're having a hard time finding a new place to rent. They also told us about your situation, about the fact that you're being evicted. Mary felt her cheeks burn. This was news to her. The landlord had given her a 30-day notice, but she hadn't realized anyone had talked to him about it. He wanted to ask, would you be interested in buying this place? City Harvest can help you finance it. You run the cafe, keep it going, make it your own. Mary stared at her, unsure if she was hearing correctly. Me? She whispered. You want me to buy this cafe? Yes, she sighed, smiling. I think you'd be great at it. And we believe in supporting women who are trying to make it on their own. Suddenly, the taste of betrayal hit Mary's mouth like a physical blow. All these years, she'd seen the smiles, heard the kind words, accepted the charity. But when it came to something real, something that could change her life, all she got was a pat on the head and a bit of pity. But this woman, she was different. She wasn't patronizing. There was no more condescension in her smile or pity in her eyes. She just saw a person trying to do the right thing and wanted to help. The woman leaned forward. So what do you say, Mary? Are you interested? Welcome to this channel. She fought back by throwing herself into work, owning her credentials while raising her child, becoming a school counselor who helped other children navigate fear and shame, even as she quietly swallowed the bitterness of discrimination. Elias grew up in the fondness of his mother's love, yet the world around him kept sending covert signals. You are different. You don't belong. Once at school, after Elias read his first essay aloud, the teacher laughed and praised him. That was wonderful. What a surprise, Elias. It sounded like a compliment, but Mary heard the subtext clearly. Expectations were low for the son of a single mother of color. Then there were the clinic visits, where the scrape on Elias's knee was dismissed by the doctor. Boys are rambunctious. Meanwhile, a white boy with a lighter injury was immediately tended to and carefully bandaged. Each time, Mary held her son close in silence. She knew that pushing back could sometimes make doors slam shut even harder. But inside, she swore Elias would not grow up steeped in shame. Her son would know he deserved love, respect, and the whole family. That is why she sat in Meridian Cafe today. Not to prove anything to Ivy Hale, to the wealthy clientele, or to the internet, but to give Elias one thing, the chance to look his father in the eye and be acknowledged. Mary Jenkins waited patiently, her gaze fixed on the elegant glass doors of Meridian Cafe. It was a place where the rich came to discuss business deals over pastries and where the paparazzi camped outside hoping to catch a glimpse of celebrities. Inside, her son Elias sat with his father, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the table lamp. The boy looked up from his pastry, his eyes shining with excitement as he spoke to the man beside him. It was a scene Mary had imagined countless times, a fantasy of normalcy that had sustained her through sleepless nights and lonely days. But now it was real, and yet it was not enough. A part of her wanted to burst through those doors. They walk up to her ex-husband and demand his attention. But she knew that would only hurt Elias. Years of therapy had taught her the destructive nature of that kind of behavior. So she stayed seated, forcing herself to breathe deeply and reminding herself of the progress they had made. 6 years ago, when Elias was diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia, their lives had shattered. Azra had been sad at first, his face pale and drawn as he held Elias' hand, promising to stay by their side. But after the initial shock, he had retreated behind a wall of legal jargon and code efficiency. He hired lawyers, drawing up documents to divide their assets and arrange for child support. In the end, the house, the savings and the art collection went to him. In exchange, he agreed to pay Mary $3,000 a month for Elias' care. There was no more mention of love or loyalty, no more acknowledgement of the pain that lay between them. When Mary signed the papers establishing sole parental responsibility, it felt as if she were severing ties with more than just her marriage. It was as though her entire past, her hopes and dreams, were being wiped away, leaving her empty and alone. But she refused to let that be the end of the story. She fought back by throwing herself into work, owning her credentials while raising her child, becoming a school counselor who helped other children navigate fear and shame, even as she quietly swallowed the bitterness of discrimination. Through it all, she never lost sight of her son's needs. She took him to museums, introducing him to art history and nurturing his love for creativity. They attended baseball games, cheering loudly from the stands, their laughter echoing in the night. Elias grew up in the fondness of his mother's laugh, yet the world around him kept sending covert signals. You are different. You don't belong. Once at school, after Elias read his first essay aloud, the teacher laughed and praised him. That was wonderful. What a surprise, Elias. It sounded like a compliment, but Mary heard the subtext clearly. Expectations were low for the son of a single mother of color. Then there were the clinic visits, where the scrape on Elias' knee was dismissed by the doctor. Boys are rambunctious. Meanwhile, a white boy with a lighter injury was immediately tended to and carefully bandaged. Each time, Mary held her son close in silence. She knew that pushing back could sometimes make doors slam shut even harder. But inside, she swore Elias would not grow up steeped in shame. Her son would know he deserved love, respect, and the whole family. That is why she sat in Meridian Chaff today. Not to prove anything to Ivy Hale, to the wealthy clientele, or to the internet, but to give Elias one thing, the chance to look his father in the eye and be acknowledged. The bell above the cafe door chimed, announcing a new arrival. Mary watched as a tall, well-dressed man entered, his face creased with 1,000 tiny lines, each telling a silent story of success and struggle. He scanned the room, his eyes searching until they met hers. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, years of resentment and regret. Finally, Ezra spoke, his voice raspy with emotion. Mary, he began, then stopped. What could he possibly say that would make things right? The past couldn't be rewritten, but perhaps they could begin to heal. If she could find it in her heart to forgive him, maybe then they could finally move forward together. Not as husband and wife, but as co-parents, united by their love for their son. I want to talk to you about Elias, he said, taking a step closer. I want to be a bigger part of his life. As the seconds ticked by, Mary felt a mix of emotions, the sting of betrayal, the warmth of his love for Elias, and the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what they had broken. She took a deep breath, bracing herself for the difficult conversation ahead. Ezra, she started, her voice shaking slightly. It was time to set the record straight, to confront the demons of the past and to secure a future for their son. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but as long as Elias' happiness was at the end of it, she was willing to fight.
The plot thickens in today's episode as shocking revelations come to light. Mary stared, frozen, at the drawing held aloft by little Elias. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. A picture of a broken family, a boy torn between two worlds. It was as if Elias, with the innocence of childhood, had laid bare the truth of their situation. How could this be? Why would Elias draw such a thing? And why did he blame it all on Ivy? Mary glanced at Ezra. His face was grim, his jaw clenched tight. In his eyes, she saw a turmoil that mirrored her own. What did this drawing mean? Was it just a child's fantasy or a glimpse into reality? Ivy Hale, her pristine white suit suddenly looking soiled, stepped forward. Her voice, usually so honeyed and smooth, was sharp with agitation. Elias, darling, where did you get this drawing? Who told you to make such a thing? The boy hesitated, then pointed a shaky finger at Mary. Mommy showed me, he said softly. Mary's heart lurched. She had never spoken a word about her relationship with Ezra to Elias. Had he overheard something? Seen something in their interactions? Mary opened her mouth to deny it, but Ivy cut her off. You shouldn't be encouraging these ideas, Mary. This is a grown-up matter. It's not appropriate for children to be involved. There was a venomous edge to Ivy's words, a clear indication of how she truly felt about Mary. But little Elias wasn't finished. He tugged at Ezra's pant leg and looked up at him with innocent eyes. But Daddy, you and Mom were together before her. You were happy then, right? The room went silent. All eyes were on Ezra. He knelt down beside Elias, his voice gentle. Yes, son, your mom and I loved each other very much once. He paused, unsure how much more he should reveal. Then, as if spurred by Elias's unwavering gaze, he continued, "But people change, son. Things don't always stay the same." Ivy stepped closer to them, placing a hand on Ezra's arm. "That's right, Elias. Sometimes people grow apart. That's why your dad and I decided to start a new chapter in our lives without any baggage from the past." The boy looked from Ezra to Ivy and back again. His lower lip trembled, and tears welled up in his big blue eyes. "So you both don't want me anymore," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. The sight of her son in pain tore at Mary's heart. She wanted to reach out to comfort him, but she held back, afraid that any movement would cause a scene. Ezra reacted instantly. He swept Ivy aside and pulled Elias into the tightest hug she had ever seen him in. "Don't talk like that, son. You're my flesh and blood. How could you think we wouldn't want you?" The raw emotion in his voice startled everyone. Mary watched as Ezra cradled Elias, whispering reassurances that only a father could utter. It was a side of Ezra she had almost forgotten, a tenderness that had been buried under layers of professionalism and aloofness. Suddenly, Elias stiffened in his father's arms, pointing a shaky finger at Ivy. "She doesn't love you anymore, Daddy. She wants you to marry her so you can have a baby with her." The boy's words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Mary gasped, her eyes widening in shock. Could Elias be right? Was Ivy only interested in Ezra for his money and status? The thought wasn't entirely outlandish. Ivy Hale was known for her calculated moves and ruthless ambition. But to believe that she had orchestrated this entire engagement to manipulate Ezra, well, that seemed preposterous. Yet the doubt had been sown. Ezra, however, didn't hesitate. He rose to his feet, his eyes blazing with anger. He turned to Ivy, his voice shaking with barely suppressed rage. "Do you dare?" He growled, taking a menacing step towards her. Ivy recoiled, taken aback by the sudden shift in Ezra's demeanor. His controlled fury was palpable, sending a shiver down her spine. Fear flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a mask of composure. "Ezra, what are you doing?" "This isn't the time or the place." Her voice, though strained, still carried its usual charm. She tried to reach out to him, but he stepped back, creating a barrier between them. "Don't touch me," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "We need to talk." He didn't bother to hide the disgust in his voice, nor did he attempt to conceal the contempt in his eyes. Mary felt a surge of triumph mixed with disbelief. Was this the cold, distant Ezra she knew? The man who had never cracked under pressure, who had never shown an ounce of vulnerability in public? What was happening? But soon that feeling was overwhelmed by a rising tide of panic. She knew this wasn't about Ivy, not really. This was about Ezra confronting his past, the past he had spent so long trying to bury. But why now? And what did it mean for her? Was this sudden outburst a sign of the turmoil raging within him, a man wrestling with his demons? She pondered as she watched the drama unfold, knowing that whatever happened next could change their lives forever. Ivy recovered quickly, her face hardening into a mask of resolve. She met Ezra's furious gaze head-on, her chin tilted defiantly. "If there's something you want to discuss, we can leave. But I won't allow you to embarrass me here." Her words were laced with venom, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Ezra sneered, his grip tightening on his son's hand. "I think we're done here." With that, he turned away, ignoring the shocked murmurs rising around them. He strode towards the exit, Elias clinging tightly to his hand. As they walked, he kept a tight hold on Elias, shielding him with his body, as if bracing him against something unseen. Mary sat rooted to her spot, her heart pounding. She wanted to call out to them, to say something, anything. But her throat was dry, her voice stuck in her chest. When they reached the door, Ezra paused and turned slightly. His eyes, hard and cold, locked onto Mary. In that instant, she saw not the successful businessman or the broken father, but a ghost of the man she once loved, a man she thought she had lost forever. "Goodbye, Mary," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. And with that, he was gone, disappearing into the bustling crowd outside. Mary felt as if the breath had been knocked out of her. She slumped back in her chair, the taste of tears on her lips. All she could do was watch as Ezra and Elias disappeared around the corner. The cheers and applause from earlier had died down to confused murmurs. Everyone was talking, but their words were a jumbled mess to Mary's ears. She heard snippets here and there. What just happened? Who's that kid? Why did Ezra leave? But she couldn't bring herself to join the chatter. She remained seated, her eyes fixed on the now empty doorway. It was Ivy's voice that broke through the noise. Well, that was dramatic, wasn't it? She sounded shaken, but there was a triumphant glint in her eyes. Mary finally tore her gaze away from the door. She met Ivy's eyes, her own filled with a mixture of sadness and anger. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. Ivy's smile faltered. For a moment, her facade wavered, revealing a flicker of something vulnerable. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the cool confidence Mary had come to know so well. "Don't you see, Mary?" Ivy said softly, her voice laced with pity. "It's over. You lost him a long time ago. And now he's mine." With that, Ivy turned away, leaving Mary in the suffocating grip of her own despair. In the wake of that earth-shattering revelation, the cafe seemed to hold its breath. The murmur of 1,000 conversations abruptly stopped. All eyes were fixed on Ivy, her face drained of color, her fingers digging into her handbag. The only sound was the frantic beating of hearts, the hum of phones still recording, the clink of silverware on plates, a teaspoon falling to the floor. Ezra took a step back, his eyes boring into Ivy. His gaze was cold, devoid of the warmth that had once defined their relationship. He clutched the drawing Elias had made, the childish lines of a family portrait mocking the fractured reality around them. "So it's true," he whispered, his voice hoarse, strained beyond repair. "It's always been true. You knew about Mary, you knew about Elias. Why didn't you tell me?" Ivy swallowed, her throat dry. There was a desperate plea in her eyes, but Ezra remained unmoved. "Why?" he pressed, the single word echoing the torment in his soul. 6 years of devotion, trust, and love, all of it a lie. And yet, a part of him still yearned for the truth. Mary felt a surge of protective anger towards her son. With a gentle touch, she guided Elias behind her, shielding him from the weight of the room's gaze. She met Ezra's eyes, a lifetime of memories passing between them. "I'm sorry, Ezra," she murmured, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I should have told you, but it wasn't just about telling him. It was about facing the truth themselves, a truth that threatened to shatter their carefully constructed lives." Ivy stepped forward, her movements stiff. Her face was a mask of regret and despair, but her eyes flickered with something else, something akin to defiance. "I only ever wanted to protect you," she said, her voice strained. "That boy and his mother, they would destroy everything we've built." Her words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Ezra flinched as if struck. His gaze dropped to the drawing in his hand. The image of a perfect family mocked his reality. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. "Destroy everything we've built," he echoed, his voice laced with sarcasm. "And what have I built, Ezra? What have we built together?" Ivy cried out, her voice breaking. "Don't you see? Without me, you wouldn't have achieved a thing. I gave you stability, support, a platform. I was your rock when everyone else abandoned you. Don't you remember? You were lost, adrift in grief. I offered you solace, and you let me help you pick up the pieces." Ezra slammed the drawing down onto a nearby table, the childish scrawl crumpling under his fist. He rose to his feet, towering over her. His eyes, dark with pain and confusion, locked onto hers. "Who are you?" he whispered, the question echoing the confusion in his heart. "Because the woman who stood beside me for the past 6 years, the woman I loved, I don't know her. I don't know who she is." As Ivy opened her mouth to respond, a choked sob escaped her lips. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the remnants of her makeup. "I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted to protect you. Protect our marriage, our company, our life together. By keeping secrets?" Ezra countered, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. He gestured around the cafe, encompassing the stunned faces, the flashing camera screens. "By destroying my reputation, my legacy, my happiness? How could you do this to me? How could you live with yourself?" Each word was a lash, stinging Ivy. She felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare in the harsh glare of the spotlight. But amidst her anguish, there was a sliver of defiance. She raised her chin, wiping away her tears. "You say that as if I'm the only one at fault. As if you haven't played a part in this too. Where were you for the past 6 years, Ezra? Lost in your world of business deals and charity galas, you never asked. You never cared. If I hadn't intervened, If I hadn't burned those letters, you wouldn't have found your son. You wouldn't have known the truth about your mother, and maybe that's what you wanted, isn't it? To punish me for taking control of your life while you were too blind to do it yourself. Her words stung, piercing the armor of righteous anger that Ezra had built around himself. A flicker of doubt crossed his features. Could she be right? Had he been so consumed by his world that he failed to notice the cracks appearing in his own foundation? Had he inadvertently pushed Ivy away by burying himself in work and the facade of a happy marriage? Mary watched the exchange, her heart aching for both of them. She saw the hurt in Ivy's eyes, the raw vulnerability, and a part of her understood. But she also saw the turmoil in Ezra's face, the conflict between his loyalty to Ivy and the undeniable pull of his past. It was a tug of war within him, a battle between duty and destiny. "Elias," Ezra suddenly whispered, turning his gaze to the drawing in his hand once more. The small figure of a boy with tousled hair and a gap-toothed smile stared back at him. His son, the boy who had changed everything. The boy who had unknowingly ignited a firestorm of emotions, memories, and truths. Ivy's eyes fell to the drawing too, her gaze softened. In that image, she saw a reflection of herself, a younger, perhaps naive version of the woman she once was. She saw the hopes and dreams she'd had, the promises she'd made, and the future she'd envisioned. But life had a way of twisting paths, leading to crossroads where choices had to be made. The weight of the room's gaze bore down on them. Cameras flashed, microphones extended, and voices buzzed like a hive of angry bees. Questions echoed through the air, demanding answers, seeking explanations. But the only sound that mattered was the rustle of Elias's drawing being unfolded. Each crease and line etched with a child's innocent hand becoming a testament to a story untold. As Ezra's gaze fell upon those childish scribbles, a realization dawned on him. He looked up at Ivy, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. "It's not about blame now," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "It's about the truth. We can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward." In that moment, the clamor of the crowd faded into a distant hum. The flashing lights blurred into a sea of white dots. All that mattered was the raw honesty in Ezra's voice, the quiet strength in his eyes. He extended a hand to Mary, his palm open, a silent invitation. For a moment, the only reality that existed was the space between their gazes, a shared understanding that transcended words. Ivy watched them, her heart clenching at the sight. She saw the bond between them, the echoes of a past that ran deeper than her own involvement. She realized then that she couldn't force Ezra's love, that she couldn't weave a tapestry of deceit to hold their marriage together. With a trembling hand, she reached out, her fingers brushing against Ezra's. It was a fleeting touch, a mere whisper of contact, yet it resonated with the weight of unspoken apologies and regrets. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted to help." In that crowded, chaotic room, amidst the cacophony of questions and accusations, there was a shift. A new chapter was unfolding, one that acknowledged the shadows of the past, but chose to walk towards the light of truth. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with complexities and heartbreaks, yet there was a shared resolve in their eyes. They had weathered storms before, and they would weather this one too. The past couldn't be rewritten, but the future was theirs to shape. As they stood there, hands intertwined, a silent promise passed between them. It wasn't a vow of everlasting love or commitment, but something more profound, a recognition of shared pain, a willingness to confront the truth and a commitment to forge ahead, together but separately, carrying the weight of their past as a reminder and a guide. Within minutes of Ivy's confession, Meridian felt less like a restaurant and more like a live studio. Every phone screen glowed, live streams flooded the internet, and outside the world was already exploding. It started innocently enough, a casual mention on social media. "Did you see Ivy and Elias at Meridian? Interesting." And then suddenly everyone was watching. Not only Ivy and Elias, but Mary and her date too. In fact, there were so many phones pointed at their table, it was hard to eat. People crowded around other tables near them, whispering, pointing, recording. Some left their meals, unable to tear their eyes away from the spectacle. It was surreal. Just hours ago, they'd been planning their next move. Now it seemed they were in someone else's film, except they couldn't control the plot. As Ivy and Elias sat frozen at the center of a dozen screens, hashtags surged at lightning speed. Within moments, they dominated trending topics worldwide. Hashtag justice for Marie, hashtag Elias deserves better, and most damning of all, a clip of Ivy's voice declaring, "I burned them." Every single letter. Mary sat frozen, clutching Elias tightly. The vindication she had longed for was mingled with exposure she had never asked for. 6 years of silent endurance had cracked open all at once, but the relief came bound together with the ache of being laid bare before strangers. Her little boy, her private grief, her memories now dissected in real time by millions. The cafe buzzed with nervous energy. Was Ezra coming? Would he defend her? Perhaps even take Ivy down? After all, how many times had he warned her about Ivy's manipulative ways? But he wasn't here, which meant one thing: Ivy had won. She'd driven a wedge between them, just like she had with his parents. Tears welled up in Mary's eyes. What if his silence meant he believed Ivy's lie? What if, after everything, he sided with his sister? The cafe door opened, silencing the murmuring crowd. There he was, Ezra, walking toward them like a man possessed, his dark suit a stark contrast against the bright lights flashing in his face. His jaw was tight, eyes hard, his usual charm replaced by a dangerous intensity. As he neared, the murmurs grew louder, desperate pleas to speak up, to defend Mary, to confirm the scandal. Ezra reached them, his gaze sweeping over the scene. His eyes, usually filled with warmth and playfulness, were now cold and distant. He looked like a stranger, or perhaps a ghost who'd come to claim his son. And in that moment, Mary knew there was no turning back. For better or worse, their lives would never be the same again. Suddenly, Ivy stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Ezra, please, don't let one moment of weakness ruin everything. Your career, your reputation, everything we built." Ezra cut across her, his voice cracked yet resolute. "We built nothing, Ivy. You built a gilded cage and locked me inside it. And you burned every bridge that could have led me back to my family." The words landed heavy, silencing even the clicking cameras. Ezra turned to Mary then, his eyes ablaze with remorse, trembling with a courage long denied. "I'm sorry." 2 words, but ones damned for 6 years. Mary felt them pierce her like glass, both wound and balm. Little Elias tilted his head up, his clear eyes still wet. "Daddy, now everyone knows. Are you going to tell the truth to all of them?" The boy's question, innocent yet inescapable, hit harder than any headline. Ezra inhaled sharply, his chest heaving. To speak the truth meant financial ruin, a crater in his empire, the collapse of his public image. To stay silent meant losing everything that mattered: his son, his chance at redemption, his soul. His eyes met Mary's, holding her gaze as he wrestled with the decision. Then, looking back at Ivy, he said quietly, "You were right. I should have told the world the truth long ago. I'm sorry for believing your lies, Ivy. I'm sorry for abandoning Mary, and I'm sorry for denying Elias's father." A beat of silence stretched, taut with emotion. Then Ezra straightened, meeting Elias's gaze directly. "But today I choose truth over lies. My son, my beautiful boy, I will always be your father. No matter what, I will always love you." The cafe erupted, cheers and applause drowning out Ivy's scream of anguish. Outside, fireworks burst in the night sky. Confetti rained down. The city itself seemed to be celebrating. Ezra took Mary and Elias home, the 3 of them sharing a car for the first time in 6 years. His arm rested lightly on Mary's shoulder, grounding her, anchoring her to the present. As they drove, news alerts flashed on the car's internal screen, each one a testament to the earthquake they had just caused. Ezra held up a hand, silencing the screen. "Don't need to hear it," he said softly. "I know what they're saying. I read it online, too." They fell silent, the weight of the last few hours settling around them. Finally, Mary spoke, her voice shaking. "Why, Ezra? Why now?" He glanced at her, his eyes mirroring her own turmoil. "Because I can't wait any longer. I can't hide anymore. I want to live my life in the light, not shadows. For me, but mostly for you and Elias." He looked away, his voice thick with emotion. "We deserve it." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She knew he was right, but the fear of exposure, of losing everything still lingered. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "Mary, I know this is scary, but I promise we'll get through this together. You, me, and Elias always." Their fingers intertwined, and in that moment she felt a surge of hope. Yes, they would face challenges, but they would face them together. Later that evening, tucked safely in bed, Mary watched the global press conference on her phone. It was a radical departure from Ezra's usual slick corporate presentations. Gone were the polished slides and jargon. Instead, he stood in the stark boardroom, surrounded by nothing but the cold concrete and steel. His normally immaculate hair was tousled, his suit rumpled, his tie loosened. He looked vulnerable, raw, heartbreakingly human. Beside him sat Ivy, clad in black, her usual regality traded for a severe, almost defeated composure. As the cameras focused on Ivy, she turned to the public for the first time, her voice shaking slightly. "I am here today to apologize. I've hurt many people, including those closest to me. I betrayed your trust and abandoned my responsibilities. I know no excuses can justify my actions, but I hope that over time I can earn your forgiveness." As Ivy spoke, flashbacks flickered through Mary's mind. Ivy's subtle jabs, her veiled threats, her acts of sabotage. Each revelation confirmed what Mary had long suspected. Ivy's confession had been a meticulously planned performance. It wasn't a spontaneous outburst of guilt. She had calculated the timing, the location, the impact. The realization both angered and saddened Mary, but it also brought a strange sense of clarity. She understood now that Ivy's grand apology was merely a strategic maneuver, an attempt to shift the narrative back in her favor. Just as Ivy finished speaking, Ezra took a deep breath and began. "My name is Ezra Stone. I'm here today to tell the truth. It's the very least I owe to everyone, especially to Mary and Elias." He paused, looking directly into the camera. 6 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I allowed my sister to convince me that Mary had betrayed me. Because of my inaction, she and my son were forced out of our lives. I grieve the years we lost, the moments I missed, the love I denied. And I know no apology can ever make up for that. With quiet determination, he continued. I'm here today to rectify that wrong. Mary and Elias are my family. They are my priority, and I will dedicate the rest of my life to making amends. In the days following the press conference, the world reacted. The carefully constructed walls around Ezra's empire crumbled. Sponsors dropped him, investors pulled out, and competitors pounced. Overnight, he went from being a revered business icon to a pariah. Headlines screamed of his downfall, predicting his imminent collapse. Yet amidst the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope. Thousands reached out to Mary, not with gossip or judgment, but with support, admiration, and love. Strangers became friends, acquaintances turned into allies. Most importantly, father and son were reunited. As the sun rose on a new day, Mary knew the battle was far from over. They had chosen truth, but truth alone doesn't build empires. It was time to rebuild, to forge new paths, to redefine their identities. Standing beside Ezra, hand in hand with Elias, she faced the dawn, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The world might have turned its back on Ezra, but Mary and Elias had not. And that, she knew, was all that truly mattered. That afternoon, the grand conference hall of Horizon Ventures no longer buzzed with numbers or billion-dollar contracts. It had been transformed into a stage where truth would be laid bare before the world. Hundreds of reporters packed the room, cameras lined in rows, flashes exploding like lightning. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest in Ezra Brooks's heart. Across livestream platforms, millions waited for the broadcast to begin. Would he admit it? Would he take responsibility? Or was this grand spectacle just another part of his elaborate game? When the clock struck, Ezra walked out. His face gaunt but his eyes steady. For the first time in years, he wasn't wrapped in the armor of a powerful tycoon. Instead, he wore the fragile weight of honesty. Behind him, Mary stood quietly, Elias in her arms. The boy looked around curiously, unaware of the full magnitude of the moment, yet his bright eyes became his father's anchor. Ezra drew a long breath, then spoke. His voice echoed through the microphones, trembling with emotion yet unflinching. Thank you for being here. I won't evade this. The videos and recordings you've seen are true. And now it's time I tell the whole story. The hall fell into complete silence. No keystrokes, no interruptions. The only sound was the soft whimper of a shudder. A single tear traced its way down Mary's cheek. 6 years ago, I abandoned the woman I loved and the son I had never even held. I let fear and the control of others blind me. I chose ambition over love, and I lived as a coward. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras swung toward Mary. She stood tall, her face calm but her eyes glistening, the living proof of every word. But Ezra's gaze was fixed on the multitude of faces staring back at him, each a testament to the lives he had touched, the people he had hurt. His voice cracked as he continued, "I know no words can undo the past, but I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me." Another ripple of sound. This time a cacophony of clicks and whirs as the assembled tech giants recorded every nuance of his confession. The truth was a tidal wave crashing against the fortress of lies, threatening to wash it all away. In that moment, Ezra felt the weight of his deceit crushing him. Yet a sliver of hope peeked through the cracks. Maybe, just maybe, if he laid everything bare, the world would understand. In front of millions of viewers worldwide, Ezra made a shocking admission. After 6 years of denying his son's existence, he was finally ready to tell the truth about Elias and expose his ex-fiancée's deception. 6 years ago, Ivy had destroyed countless letters from his mother, effectively severing ties between Ezra and his only family member. This had left him shattered and lost, driving him to propose a sham marriage to Ivy and adopt her child, all to fill the void in his life. But the truth was, he had never loved Ivy. His heart had always belonged to Mary, the woman he'd fallen in love with in college. Despite the physical distance, Mary had never given up on their love. She had sent Ezra countless letters, hoping to rekindle what they once shared. But Ivy had intercepted those letters, ensuring that Ezra remained oblivious to his mother's love and his son's existence. However, the tables had turned. Now, standing before the world, Ezra publicly acknowledged Elias as his son and apologized for his actions. With tears streaming down his face, he confessed, "My son's name is Elias. He's 6. He loves to draw. He once drew a family with a rainbow above it, a dream so simple, yet I stole it from him for 6 years. Today, I want to say I'm sorry. To my son, to his mother, to everyone who ever believed in the false image I created." His voice broke. Elias tugged at his sleeve, then leaned forward and pressed a tiny hand on the microphone. The entire hall held its breath. The boy's voice was soft, uncertain, but clear. "Daddy said sorry. So now, will you come home with me and Mama?" The question pierced through millions of viewers. Mary pulled her son close, but Ezra crouched down, tears brimming, and whispered, "Yes, son. Daddy's coming home. I'll never leave again." The sound of shudders filled the room. Some journalists quietly wiped their eyes. But Ezra wasn't finished. Rising to his full height, his voice grew stronger, no longer trembling but lit with resolve. "You also heard it yourselves. My former Ivy Hale admitted to intercepting and destroying every letter my mother wrote in her final days. Those letters held her apology, her truth, and the only chance for me to know my son earlier. I will fully cooperate with investigators. I will not hide anything." Reporters shouted questions, but Ezra raised a hand, ending with a single declaration, "I may lose my career. I may lose my fortune, but I will not lose my family again. I have lived too long in the shadows of fear. Today, I choose the light of truth. And I accept every consequence." The words rang out like an oath not only for himself, but for everyone watching. Across the world, millions typed comments, shared the clip, and whispered their own stories of love, loss, and the courage to side with truth. Ivy's perfect facade had finally crumbled, revealing the manipulative and deceptive woman she truly was. Her plan to destroy Ezra's family had backfired, bringing their love story full circle. It was a tale that resonated across the globe, reminding everyone that love and truth, like Ezra and Elias, can find their way back to each other. I've waited 46 years to find my biological parents. This is how they found mine. Part 2. The murmurs in the press hall had barely quieted when the back doors swung open. Ivy Hale appeared. No longer the cold, imperious woman from that morning, she entered pale-faced, her heavy makeup straining to hide the panic beneath. Her pristine white designer coat remained immaculate, but her eyes betrayed her secret, fear coursing through every vein. All cameras turned to her. Livestream screens across the world lit up again with a new banner, #IvySpeaks. She walked straight to the podium, her voice trembling, yet clinging to the poise of a Manhattan socialite. "Please listen to me. Everything I did to protect Ezra, to protect the company, to protect what we built together. I never meant to hurt the child. I only..." A single tear escaped, tracing a path through the carefully applied makeup. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. Journalists frowned, viewers flooded chat boxes with scathing comments. Excuses, lies, protect who? By burning a dying mother's letters? Ezra's voice cut through, deep and restrained, though fury simmered beneath. Protect? You stole my mother's last words. You erased the only chance I had to know my son earlier. And you call that protection, Ivy? The word hung in the air, pregnant with accusation. Ivy flinched, frantically searching for support, but every eye in the hall had turned cold. Then Elias, who had stood quietly by Mary's side, stepped forward. He tugged at his father's sleeve, then lifted his innocent gaze to Ivy. His voice, soft yet cutting, rang through the microphones. You protected Daddy by burning my drawings? And by burning Grandma's letters? The hall froze. The child's question, simple and merciless, thundered louder than any accusation. Ivy's lips trembled, but no words came. Mary placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder, then faced Ivy herself. Her tone was calm, not cruel, but it carried the weight of every scar she had borne. You say you wanted to protect Ezra, but all you protected was the image you wanted the world to see. And to do it, you crushed a child's memory and turned a man into an orphan while his mother was still alive. The words sliced through the last veneer of Ivy's pride. Cameras zoomed in on her face, catching every twitch of anguish. Elias tilted his head, his voice softer now, almost pitying. Do you feel sad when nobody chooses you? Grandma said love doesn't have to be perfect. The question broke her. Tears spilled, mascara streaked down her cheeks, her mask collapsing before millions of witnesses. But her regret had come too late. Ezra rested a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice clear and resolute. You're right, Elias. Love doesn't need perfection, it only needs truth. And today, I choose truth. The hall erupted in flashes, applause, and cries. Ivy bowed her head, retreating from the podium under the crushing weight of silence, while Ezra, Mary, and Elias stood together, for the first time, openly, as a family. Ezra wrapped an arm around Mary's waist, pulling her close as Elias snuggled against his leg. The trio seemed an image of domestic bliss, a stark contrast to Ivy, who stood rigid by her lawyer's side. We won, Elias whispered, looking up at his parents with innocent joy. Mary bent to meet his gaze, a soft smile gracing her lips. Yes, sweetheart. We did. She turned to Ezra, her eyes shining with unshed tears. It's over, Ezra. It's finally over. He nodded, holding her gaze, the unspoken promise of forever passing between them. The hall buzzed with activity as journalists surged forward, eager to corner the Heston family. Flashbulbs popped incessantly, making it hard to discern faces, but their questions rang loud and clear. Mr. Heston, can you comment on your newfound relationship? Mrs. Heston, how does it feel to have your son by your side after all these years? Elias, what do you think about having a new mother? The barrage continued, relentless and intrusive. Ezra stepped forward, shielding Mary and Elias with his own body, his voice a low growl that brooked no argument. We appreciate your interest, but this is a private matter. Suddenly, a hand shot out, gripping Ezra's arm. Ivy stood there, desperation twisting her features. Ezra, please, you have to believe me. I never meant... Her pleas were cut off by a sharp yank. Her lawyer, a tall, gaunt man with slicked-back gray hair, pulled her back sharply. Mrs. Hilton, if I may, he began, his voice oily and grating. My client would like a word with Mr. Heston. Ignoring the lawyer's words, Ivy rushed to Ezra, her eyes pleading for understanding. Ezra, you know I loved you. I still do. Let me explain. He recoiled as if physically pained, his face hardening. Don't touch me. How could you say you loved me when you stole my son away? When you lied to me, to us, to protect what? Your so-called love wasn't real. You just couldn't bear the thought of sharing the spotlight. You chose our destruction to save your reputation. As Ezra spoke, the raw pain in his voice tore through Ivy like shards of glass. Each word struck home, a painful reminder of the love they once shared, a love she had willingly destroyed. She swayed, her perfect composure crumbling. Her hands trembled, reaching out as if to grasp at Ezra's anger. But he was gone, melting back into the crowd. Her lawyer, sensing the hopelessness of the situation, clamped a hand on her shoulder, steering her away from the growing chaos. Outside, A swarm of reporters awaited, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust forward. The lawyer put a calming hand on Ivy's arm. "My client is not available for comment. Thank you." Despite his efforts, Ivy broke free, stumbling toward the waiting press. "Please, you have to listen to me. I am not a bad person. I never wanted to hurt anyone." Her voice cracked, betraying the desperate hope in her words. "But you did hurt them, Ivy. You systematically destroyed a family for your own selfish reasons." "Why? Why would you do that?" A reporter shouted, eager to get the scoop. Ivy hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. I wanted to protect Ezra. I thought I was doing the right thing. By burning away his past, his memories, his future." "What kind of future are you talking about?" Another voice boomed. Ivy looked up to see Mary standing before her, her face a mask of controlled fury. "You erased my husband's memories of his childhood. You burned the letters I wrote to him during his darkest hours. You denied him the chance to know his heritage, to know his roots." The reporters gasped, recognizing the raw emotion in Mary's voice. She stepped closer to Ivy, her gaze boring into hers. "And why? Just why would you do this?" Ivy shrank under Mary's piercing stare, unable to meet her gaze. The enormity of her actions crashed down on her, crushing her like a discarded doll. She looked up, desperation edging into her voice. I didn't know. I was scared." Her words hung in the air, pathetic and weak. Mary shook her head, her shoulders slumping slightly. "No, Ivy, you weren't scared. You were selfish. You chose yourself, your reputation over my son's happiness, over the bond between a son and his parents. How can you live with that?" Ivy closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. The weight of Mary's words pressed upon her chest, stealing her breath. In that moment, she understood the depth of the chasm that separated them, a chasm she had dug herself. There was no bridge over it now, no way back. Her confession had brought no solace, no redemption. Only scorn and hatred met her. The truth had been revealed, but it had not set her free. Now stripped bare before the world, she faced the consequences of her actions. And as the cameras flashed and the reporters closed in, she knew there was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. The game was over. She had lost. The video of the press conference that very night swept across every platform. Within 6 hours, it had reached 20 million views. By morning, the entire world had heard Elias's piercing question. "You protected Daddy by burning my drawings and by burning Grandma A's letters? That innocent. Why do you hate me?" Spoken in the previous video, cut like a knife through the carefully constructed narrative Ivy had spun. Her version of events, where she was an unsuspecting victim, a mere defender of her daughter's innocence, evaporated under the searing light of publicity. No one was fooled by her crocodile tears this time. Everyone saw through the cracks in her facade. Overnight, hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Hashtag Elias draws, hashtag truth over fear, hashtag justice for Mary, hashtag love not image. The public didn't just share the story out of morbid curiosity. They saw their own lives reflected in it, the times they were judged for their skin color origins or for not adhering to social norms. The apologies that were never sent the children who bore the weight of adult fear and prejudice. Morning shows dissected every detail of the video. Ivy grinding her heel into Elias's drawing, Mary's silent tears, Ezra's broken confession, and above all, the unguarded forgiveness in Elias's words. Psychologists called it a child's truth moment, when a kid speaks so candidly that it shakes an adult world built on pretense. Sociologists labeled it a strike against the culture of false perfection among Manhattan's elite, a perfect veneer that conceals deep-seated insecurities and prejudices. But no one understood better than fellow parents. They rallied around Mary, praising her for instilling such honesty in her son. Family therapists lauded Elias for his remarkable emotional intelligence. Within 24 hours, Mary's lawyer received a call from the producers of a popular talk show. "We want Mary and Elias to come on our show." The lawyer knew it would be a turning point. It wouldn't just be about their story anymore. It would become a platform for every silenced voice, every prejudiced whisper, every act of casual cruelty that went unchecked. And so the mother and son embarked on a whirlwind journey, appearing on every major morning show, their story evolving into a cultural moment. But neither Mary nor Elias craved the spotlight. They simply wanted their life back. Yet as they stepped into the glare of publicity, something extraordinary happened. The initial shock of the story gave way to a profound shift in perspective. People didn't just pity Elias for his unusual skin color or question Mary's parenting choices. They began sharing their own experiences. Suddenly, every playground became a forum. Every parent support group buzzed with activity. The Elias Draws Challenge was born. Children were encouraged to draw their families as they saw them, not as society dictated they should. Rainbows, single mothers, stepfathers, foster siblings, all manner of family configurations flooded social media, drowning out the old narrative. For the first time in a long while, Mary felt seen, not pitied. The world acknowledged the strength it took to be a single mother, the resilience she'd shown up for her son, the unconditional love she offered Elias, the child who taught the world that love knows no color. As for Elias, he became an ambassador of sorts, not just for children with albinism, but for all kids who dared to be different. His art, once hidden away, now adorned gallery walls and museum exhibits. He used his newfound platform to advocate for children's mental health, urging adults to listen to the whispers of their kids, to take their fears seriously, and to nurture their dreams. In the end, the scandal that threatened to tear them apart became the catalyst for profound change, reshaping their lives, their community, and the world's perception of what a family truly is. The story wasn't just about Mary and Elias anymore. It became a shared narrative, a testament to the transformative power of love, acceptance, and the indomitable spirit of a mother and son whose bond was forged in adversity and tempered by an unwavering belief in each other. One day, amidst the chaos of their extraordinary new life, Mary sat down with Elias, his art supplies scattered around them. Looking at the vibrant colors, the bold brush strokes, she saw not just a reflection of her son, but a mirror to the world they had changed together. "Mommy, why did they stop calling us weird?" Elias asked, his eyes wide with innocent curiosity. Mary's heart swelled with love and a fierce protective instinct. "Because, sweetheart, we're not weird. We're wonderfully made." Then, as if realizing something profound, she added softly, "Because, Elias, sometimes it takes a little fire to make beautiful rainbows." And in that moment, Elias, the boy who drew the world differently, became the bridge between two realities, showing humanity how to see beyond the surface, to find beauty in diversity and strength in vulnerability. Our world was in dire need of a reality check. So when Ezra 2 transformed, it was more than a headline. It was a wake-up call. In his next appearance, he didn't speak of profits or markets, but of something raw and human. Money doesn't hold a family together. Reputation doesn't raise a child. Only truth and love can do that. The line spread like wildfire. It graced magazine covers, was quoted by politicians in speeches, and even pinned to classroom walls as a lesson for the next generation. As for Ivy, the image of her weeping in a white suit, mascara streaking like cracks in porcelain, became a global talking point. Many condemned her cruelty, yet others saw in her the mirror of society itself, the pressure to be flawless, to be chosen, to be worthy. Comment sections split between unforgivable to harm a child, and perhaps villains are only victims of cycles of fear. Within a week, the movement had grown beyond one family's tragedy. Nonprofits launched the #Elias initiative, raising funds for families facing discrimination. Universities hosted forums on authentic love versus social image. Corporations pledged to review hiring and housing policies to dismantle hidden biases like those Mary had endured. And so the world looked back to a small cafe in Manhattan as the birthplace of a global conversation. A 6-year-old boy with a few unfiltered questions had made millions of adults stop and confront their own truths. In a world that often feels like it's lost its way, stories like Ezra's can be a lifeline. They remind us of what really matters, the strength and vulnerability, the power of truth and the beauty of unconditional love. His story is a testament to the transformative power of a child's innocent perspective. In a world that's all too eager to judge, Ezra encourages us to pause, to listen, and to learn. Because sometimes it is in the quiet moments of introspection that we find the strength to become better versions of ourselves. And if you think about it, isn't that the greatest legacy a child could ever leave behind? Not just for the adults in the room, but for the other children, for their future, for the world at large. The story doesn't end with Ezra's diagnosis or Ivy's tears. It continues with each one of us who listens to his tale, who feels the weight of his words, and who strives to make a difference. It's a call to action, an invitation to be part of a larger conversation. A conversation about empathy, understanding, and the relentless pursuit of a more compassionate world. 1 week after the explosive press conference, as the hashtag Elias Initiative movement spread worldwide, an old envelope suddenly surfaced. It was the final letter of Eleanor Brooks, Ezra's mother, preserved all these years by Harper Evans, the nurse who had cared for her in her last days. The media broadcast the moment live. Harper, her hands trembling yet her voice steady, standing before the cameras. "I promised Mrs. Eleanor that if the truth never reached her son while she lived, I would be the one to deliver it after she was gone. Today, I keep that promise." She opened the worn envelope and unfolded a sheet yellowed with time. The handwriting was shaky, the script of a woman weakened by illness but still determined to pen every last word. "My beloved son, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. I made the greatest mistake of my life by keeping you from your true love. I caused Mary to weep, and I let little Elias grow up fatherless. I told myself it was for honor, for the family name. But in truth, I was only protecting my own fear. And because of that fear, I traded away love, blood, and your peace of heart. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But if there is one chance left, I beg you, do not repeat my path. Do not choose the approval of the world over the embrace of your family. Do not let that child believe he is a mistake. Elias is a gift, the very gift I cruelly rejected. Now all I can do is pray you will claim him and cherish him as your greatest treasure. Remember this, Ezra. Love does not need approval to be real. I understood that far too late. Teach Elias what I could not teach you, that true love never brings shame, only freedom." The phone slipped from Harper's hand, clattering to the table beside her as she broke down in tears. The live feed cut back to the studio where a single mother sat, cradling her son close. The image on the screen was shaky, the connection obviously poor. But the words were clear, and the message resonated with millions. In that moment, more than just a confession, more than just an apology, a legacy was rewritten. Love, the kind that conquers all, even death, even deceit, even the sins of the past. The kind that binds families together, that mends broken hearts. That gives hope where there seemed to be none. That's what they had. And as the world watched, breathless, waiting for Ezra's response, we saw Elias, his eyes wide with innocent curiosity, reach out a tiny hand to touch his father's face. A silent plea, a silent promise. And in the depths of his gaze, a flicker of recognition, a silent echo of a love that knew no bounds. A bond that defied distance, a connection that transcended time. For in the tapestry of their lives, the threads of fate were weaving a new design, a testament to the enduring power of love. Love, the ultimate truth, the driving force of our existence. It compelled us, consumed us, gave meaning to our every breath. Love, in its myriad forms, connected us, challenged us, and ultimately defined us. In the grand theater of life, where every act played out under the spotlight of love, we found ourselves at a pivotal moment. The revelation of the truth, like a seismic shift, had shaken the foundations of their world. Yet amidst the tremors, something profound was stirring, a quiet strength that whispered of resilience, a gentle wisdom that spoke of healing. As the weight of the revelation settled upon them, they stood at a crossroads. The path ahead, though uncertain, held the promise of growth, of understanding, of a love that dared to defy convention, a love that was their very essence. Their story was a reminder that love, in its purest form, was a language that transcended societal norms, a melody that echoed through generations, a guiding light that led us home. It was a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, the capacity to love, to forgive, and ultimately, to heal. In the grand tapestry of life, where every thread tells a story, there was a narrative that spoke of love's transformative power, a saga that would continue to unfold, reminding us all that in the grand scheme of things, love truly was the ultimate truth. As the world watched, holding its breath, the silence stretched, pregnant with anticipation. What would Ezra's response be? Would he, like his mother before him, succumb to the suffocating grip of societal expectations? Or would he rise above, embracing the truth, claiming both his son and his happiness? The answer, when it came, would reverberate through eternity, shaping not just their lives, but the lives of countless others who dared to dream of a love that knew no bounds. This touching story is part 2 of the series, A Mother's Day Surprise. Read part 1 before this to understand what happened previously. Link to part 1 is in the description. The next day, Mary decided to take the letter to the studio. She wanted her son and husband to read it together on air. As soon as Harper finished reading, silence blanketed the room. No keystrokes, no camera clicks, only the sound of muffled sobs. Mary's tears streamed freely. Elias, sensing his grandmother's sadness, climbed onto her lap and wrapped his small arms around her waist. He didn't understand the words, but he knew the feeling behind them. Ezra sat across from them, head bowed, clutching the edge of the table. He too was crying, unable to stop the flood from his eyes. Under the glare of the studio lights, the man who was once untouchable, who commanded boardrooms with a single word, now wept like a child who had lost his mother all over again. Then Elias tugged his father's hand and whispered into the microphone, his innocent words echoing around the world. "Daddy, Grandma said she was wrong, but she still loved us. So we can forgive her, right?" The question hung in the air, pure and piercing. It cut through the fog of grief and regret that had settled over Ezra these past 12 years. He nodded, his voice quivering as he replied, "Yes, son, we forgive her. Because forgiveness is the only way to keep love alive." Mary looked at them both, her heart torn yet comforted. Eleanor's letter had reopened old wounds, but it had also opened a door toward reconciliation, toward healing, toward a peace that had been denied for so long. On social media, the tide began to turn. Eleanor's words spread like wildfire, quoted as warnings and laments. Millions confessed they saw their own families in those words. They saw the walls built from prejudice, the choices born of fear, the longing for unconditional love. They saw the truth in love does not need approval. It only needs to be chosen every single day. But for Mary, there was more. In the depths of her despair, she found a flicker of hope. A single word from her grandson, innocent and wise beyond his years, had shown her the way forward. Forgiveness. It was the key that could unlock the door to a future that wasn't just about remembering, but about moving forward. Forgiveness wasn't for Eleanor. It was for her, for Elias, for Ezra, and for the fractured pieces of their family. It was about letting go of the past so they could finally begin to heal. One summer afternoon, 6 months after Eleanor's letter was revealed, the small courtyard behind Horizon Ventures had transformed. What had been an overlooked patch of ground in the heart of Manhattan was now a sanctuary people called the Second Garden, a symbol of second chances of truth spoken too late but still powerful enough to heal. Mary sat on a stone bench, sunlight streaming through the branches above her shoulders. In front of her, Elias, now 7, leaned over his easel, brushes darting quickly, his bright eyes glowing as though every stroke was a heartbeat. Beside him stood Ezra, silent, watching the son whose early years he had missed. In that silence, Mary could sense his vow. He would never let that absence happen again. On the canvas, Elias painted 4 figures, a man, a woman, a child, and a figure with soft wings. Above them, in careful blue letters, he wrote, "We found each other again." Mary swallowed hard, her bitterness melting into colors of hope. Ezra stepped closer, crouched down beside his son, and asked softly, "Who is the one with wings, Elias?" The boy smiled, his voice both innocent and steady. "That's Grandma Eleanor. She's still here, just walking a different path." No one said another word, but tears fell freely. Mary's hand slipped into Ezra's, and for the first time in years, she felt no distance, only the presence of a family, scarred and once broken, but learning to mend. In the end, it was the quiet moments that echoed the loudest. The gentle brush of sunlight on skin, the shared taste of bittersweet ice cream, the comforting weight of a hand in hers. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the spoken words. It was in the feeling of belonging, of being seen, of knowing that even in the midst of loss, life, like a stubborn weed, found a way to bloom. And in the heart of Manhattan, amidst the towering giants of glass and steel, a small garden bloomed, tended by the hands of love and forgiveness. It was just another Saturday until it wasn't. That day, they weren't alone. Other families came to the garden too, carrying children's drawings, unfinished letters, fragments of memory once denied. A single mother left a rainbow sketch on the stone altar. A widowed father laid down a note from his daughter. "I believe you're strong enough, Dad." Soon dozens of pictures hung among the trees, turning the garden into a living gallery of wounds and healing. Ezra bent toward Elias, whispering loud enough for Mary to hear, "Thank you for teaching Daddy courage." "Thank you, Mama, for teaching Daddy what love really is." Mary lifted her gaze, her eyes red but shining. what matters isn't that we failed once. What matters is that we chose to make it right. And this time we chose the truth. A breeze drifted through, carrying the scent of lavender from the far corner. Elias stood proudly, hanging his painting in a wooden frame at the center of the garden. He turned back, grinning. Now everyone can see my family. And I think maybe other families will be brave enough to draw theirs again too. A journalist's camera captured the moment the boy pinning his picture, titled, "We found each other again." The image went viral overnight, becoming the emblem of the Elias Initiative. What began as one family's private tragedy had grown into a beacon for thousands learning to speak their truth. The Elias Initiative started with one family's messy unraveling. When Mary first came to Ezra with bruises on her arm and a shaken baby in her arms, he wanted to help, but didn't know where to start. After all, she was his wife, yet a stranger. All he knew was how much Elias looked like her and how much she looked like him. So he asked the only questions that mattered. With each hesitant word, the dam broke. Years of buried trauma and lies tumbled out, leaving Mary breathless. In that instant, Ezra understood. Their shared past was why their present was so fractured. He learned of the beatings, the terror, the silence that had been forced upon them, stealing their voices in their childhood. Fueled by rage and grief, Ezra confronted his parents. They offered apologies laced with contempt, proving they'd changed nothing. No amount of money or manipulation could make Mary stay this time. She was done being a doormat, done letting her guard down. She packed a bag for herself and Elias, leaving behind the life that had become a gilded cage. At 12, Elias knew more than any child should, having seen too much darkness in his parents' shadows. But what he understood most was this: love is patient. Love is kind. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Looking at Mary and seeing her guarded walls, he knew she needed his love most of all. So he drew a picture for her, a symbol of their new beginning. It was just a simple drawing of a girl holding hands with a boy, both with bandages on their wrists, looking up at a bright sun. Their journey was far from easy. Fearful whispers followed them. Some people found their story too unbelievable to be true, but others saw their scars and believed because they too had stories to tell. As more and more people came forward, the whispers grew louder, forcing the media's attention. Suddenly they were a local news story, then a national one. Then came the summons from the Prime Minister, inviting them to the presidential palace. To Mary's surprise, she found herself bearing their souls to the highest court in the land. As cameras flashed and journalists scribbled notes, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning around, she saw a young girl holding a drawing of two stick figures, one big and one small, labeled Mommy and Me. Kneeling down, Mary took the drawing, her eyes meeting the girl's. In that silent moment, she knew she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every child who deserved a chance at innocence. When the Prime Minister announced the establishment of the Elias Initiative, a nationwide program to address childhood trauma, Mary knew their ordeal had turned a corner. With each passing day, more families stepped out of the shadows, finding strength in numbers. The garden became their sanctuary, a place to heal and remember. For Mary and Ezra, it was a chance to start over, not as the scared, damaged children their parents had kept them as, but as individuals ready to embrace the messy, complicated beauty of life. Because they chose to be brave, their son Elias, the embodiment of hope, became the catalyst for change, proving that even in the darkest of times, love, if chosen, can mend even the most fractured of families.